John and Abigail Adams are among the most important people in colonial America. Unfortunately, they're practically neglected in today's popular reading of American literary and cultural history. Why are they so important? Well, John Adams was the second president of the United States. That fact alone would make him noteworthy. But Adams was more than just George Washington's vice president and successor. Adams was an elder statesman in the Revolutionary period. He represented a major wing of the American political system at the time. Abigail, too, was a major figure in her own right. Her surviving correspondence alone should make her a prominent American. Some of the best insights into American politics in revolutionary times come from the correspondence between John and Abigail. She was her husband's closest confidant, and her views helped shape the new American nation. As a lawyer in colonial America, John Adams became an important figure, and when revolution was breaking out against England, Adams's sympathies were with the Americans. Nevertheless, after the Boston Massacre, when British soldiers were tried in colonial American courts for murder, John Adams took the case of Captain Preston and the British soldiers and defended them in court. They had been attacked by a mob, and their actions, in Adams' view, and later the court's view, was that the unfortunate incident came closer to self-defense than murder. Adams writes about his role, quote, "The part I took in defense of Captain Preston and the soldiers procured me anxiety and obloquy enough. It was, however, one of the most gallant, generous, manly, and disinterested actions of my whole life, and one of the best pieces of service I ever rendered to my country. Judgment of death against those soldiers would have been as foul a stain upon this country as the execution of the Quakers or witches anciently," end quote. Adams could have parlayed his service to His Majesty's soldiers into a comfortable and lucrative post in the British administration over the colonies, but he had not taken the case for personal gain and never intended to become a British loyalist to the English king. Instead, Adams used his notoriety and stature as an objective jurist to argue that the colonialists' claims against England were just, and they too deserved a fair hearing in the English court. In time, Adams became a representative to the Continental Congress, and his importance can be seen in some of the roles he eventually accepted. For example, when the Second Continental Congress was ready to draft a Declaration of Independence against Britain, Adams was chosen among 4 others to write the declaration. And it was Adams who selected Thomas Jefferson to write the very first draft. While Jefferson at first tried to shirk this responsibility, telling Adams that Adams himself should write it, Adams gave him 3 reasons why this was a bad idea. Quoting Adams again, "First, you are a Virginian, and a Virginian ought to appear at the head of this business. Reason second, I am obnoxious, suspected, and unpopular. You are very much otherwise. Reason third, you can write 10 times better than I can," end quote. What could Jefferson say? What he is recorded to have said is, "Well, if you are decided, I will do as well as I can." And he certainly did that. Adams later served the United States as its first ambassador to Britain, and then as vice president and president of the United States. His importance to America can hardly be overstated, and his writings are voluminous. As you read the short selections in our course, look for the founders' attitude about religion and prayer, especially government-sponsored prayer. Ask yourself if original documents suggest that the founders intended to establish an overtly secular state. If the founders wanted a separation of church and state, what did this separation look like at the time? John Adams and Thomas Jefferson became bitter political rivals during their early years in public office. They represented different approaches to politics and governance. Nevertheless, in their later life, they rekindled their close relationship and corresponded affectionately throughout their lifetimes. They died on the same day. Jefferson died just before Adams, but the news had not reached the ailing Adams, who is reputed to have said these last words, "Thomas Jefferson survives." Among the many reasons to read these writings by America's founders is to develop a sense of what they thought they were establishing in the creation of this new American experiment. Some modern Americans think that the founders' views are irrelevant today. They might ask, what do we care what people over 200 years ago wanted? Still, even if people feel little or no debt to our forebears, they should remember that to understand our current culture, we must understand how and why we got here. the founders charted a political, social, and economic course for the United States. And without knowing from where we have come, we cannot understand what changes occurred. If we have no idea where we have come from and where we have been, how can we know what we are close to and what pitfalls and opportunities are at hand? Moreover, if we have been going in some particular direction towards some specific goal, we should demand a pretty thorough explanation and accounting before we turn around 180 degrees and head back in some direction settlers abandoned some 396 years ago. Let's keep reading for now, and we will revisit these ideas again as we continue reading American literature.